Welcome back to Shades of View with Kenya and Michael at the Blanchard Institute, sponsored by the Blanchard Institute. We're so glad to be back today, and we do have a special guest with us today. We have Casey True, who works with our sober living environment, and she also works with our alumni. And today is going to be a special treat because we're going to dive into, if you haven't noticed, they have the same last name.
Sure.
And we do not want to get Erica, who is behind the scenes, who is always waving, giving us cues. So I'm going to direct it over to Mike. We're kind of dive in today, and I'll let him lead the way on this. So stay with us. This is going to be an exciting episode.
Yeah, so in case you could not pick it up, Casey is my wife. We are both in recovery ourselves. Went through it a lot together. But obviously, most importantly, it took us kind of going our own ways for a little while before finally finding success. So thought it would be good to get Casey on here. One, give a little bit of her background, share what she does, but also kind of dive into treatment and recovery and sobriety from a different standpoint that we obviously know is something that is usually frowned upon, but also it's something that needs to be talked about, especially, even if people aren't in relationships when they come into treatment, at some point in their recovery, they will end up getting into a relationship at some point, whether it's romantically or just friends, whatever it is. So I think having Casey here will give us some good perspective on that. So,
yeah, thanks, Mike, and Kenya. I'm really excited.
Don't call me Mike.
I've never called him Mike in my entire
Don't
life.
ever do that. What?
So that's a fun thing about working with Michael is that he introduces himself to everyone else as Mike, and they'll come to me and say, "Oh, I know your husband, Mike," and then I feel like I have to call you that for the first time in my life.
It feels weird when you do that.
Yeah, well, no.
I don't know.
You call him Michelangelo.
I think I call him Mike. I don't know.
A lot of people call me Mike.
Yeah.
It's Mike or True or
Yeah. But your name is Michael, so that's what I'm going to continue to call you and not Mike.
That works.
But
Anyways.
anyway, I'm really excited to be here and be a part of this podcast today. I've, watched behind the scenes as it has developed, and I couldn't think of two better people to be on it than you two, and I appreciate being here today. I am the Extended Care and Alumni Services Manager for the Blanchard Institute, so that's a super long title that just states that I oversee our extended care program. So we have a sober living environment for men, and then we have a program for women as well, and then our alumni services. So I think I got really lucky in my job. I get to see individuals day one coming into treatment, and then I get to have the alumni aspect of, guiding them in recovery beyond treatment. So it's a pretty cool outlook that I get to have.
One thing that I value about working with Michael, I don't think I ever called him Michael before, but I'll do it now, and Casey, is that they're so fun. And their relationship is so fun. They kind of pop in my office at different times, and they just have this vibe about them. I know one day I was like, Mike, where's Casey? And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, can you text her? He's like, she probably respond to you faster than she respond to me. 100%. And so it's so interesting to see the dynamics of your relationship. And I know, like, as Michael said, it's something that we kind of frown upon a little bit in recovery. And if you guys could just give us a little background on just a little bit of your history and how, you maneuver through this, because there are so many obstacles when we talk about relationships in recovery, even friendships.
Yeah.
It can be very difficult to formulate those. So if you could just give us a little insight into how this story began, not the, we're not going to jump into your, how the, all of the details, but just a little background of how we got here.
So
I got you.
Not a deep dive into
Not a
trauma
deep dive.
today. Okay. Good to
That's
know.
hurtful. Okay.
Well, it's part of the process,
Okay.
I actually was speaking with a woman who was coming into our program the other day, and she was telling me about her husband, and she said, I said, where did y'all meet? And she said, oh, we met on Tinder. It's kind of embarrassing. And I said, well, I have a story for you. And because Michael and I met in treatment, which is, as you said, extremely frowned upon. Treatment, FYI, for anyone that hears this, treatment is not a place you go to find a significant other. It is a place you go to work on yourself and, mend relationships that are already existing. Forming new relationships during that time is so challenging. And, we faced the ups and downs of that.
Yeah, and I will say, just as a little side note, as two people who have made it through the other side, we are the first ones to tell you to not do it.
Don't do it.
Because it, obviously, super grateful I met Casey. Love my life nowadays. But if there was a thing that I could have done differently, it was probably, to hold off and wait. It was not fun or easy. A lot of shame associated with it, especially, leaving treatment. Obviously, sobriety didn't last long because our priorities were not in the right place. So a lot of pain, a lot of bad days, a lot of really dark moments. And so I think people see, especially I've had this discussion with a couple clients before where it's like, hey, I understand, and I understand where you're coming from, but also it's not the right time. And then, I'll get well, what do you mean? You did it. And I understand that, but people see now, like you said, people see like the really happy stuff now. And I think our past kind of gives us that perspective because, again, a lot of dark times. So nowadays, like even when we get into an argument or we disagree on something, we know it's such a small, insignificant barrier at that point in time because we've already, a lot of people talk about struggles and things like that in relationships, and it's whatever it is, it's like infidelity or social media stuff or whatever it is nowadays. But I don't know if you're gonna, I hope you don't mind this, but when you've Narcaned your significant other and brought them back when you thought that they were gonna pass away, when you come back from things like that, and then now you got the troubles of today, like, so in September we went to Costa Rica for the first time. Like, it was our first big trip. And I remember we got in an argument over like how much money we wanted to spend or didn't want to spend. And it got like pretty heated for a second. And then it was kind of like, let's like take a step back. Like, if 5 years ago you would have told us that this is what we've been arguing about, I would have probably punched you in the face.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and been like, stop lying. But so, yes, super grateful for my life now and the relationship that I have. However, if I could go back and maybe put a pause on, obviously meeting her is great and like having a friendship relationship is good. But again, keeping those priorities in order, I think would have benefited both of us in the long run. And maybe we wouldn't have been in and out of treatment for the first, 2-3 years of our relationship? Yeah.
So afterwards, I definitely want to know after the podcast, I want to know who wanted to spend the most because now I got to know.
Oh,
me.
I will tell you right now. Yeah, it was Michael.
I was leaning towards that, but
Yes.
No contest.
And I definitely can see how that would truly make a difference looking at priorities now. And I think that's one of the things that, makes, a clinician say, hey, hold off on the relationship because we always say anything, it's so cliche, anything you put before recovery is going to outweigh your recovery and you're going to find yourself making that the priority. So the fact that you guys can give that as a fact to those individuals who are considering that now is just a true testament as to why we say, hey, it's probably not a good idea. And you're a true testament of it could happen. Mm-hmm. I think your story is like the outlier as to this is what it looks like when we come out on the other end and this is what we had to endure. This is what we had to go through. And it takes two really dedicated and strong people to withstand that. And I think you both make a good point of saying, if I could go back, I would totally do it differently. I think looking at your story gives people hope that it can be done, but also lets people know that, listen, it's not going to be an easy road. And if recovery is what you both want, then maybe you should put that first.
Yeah.
If you could change the trajectory,
Yeah.
like what would you go back and say, hey, yeah, let's do this differently other than waiting?
Yeah, exactly. And, we something that we hear in 12-step programs is there's no easier, softer way. The easier, softer way is not getting into a relationship before you're ready. And it is, I wouldn't, I don't know that I would do it differently. I wish I knew now what I didn't know then. Or I wish I knew then what I know now. I don't think I would do it differently, but I am very much aware that we experienced together and separately a lot of pain that we wouldn't have experienced otherwise. And, I am not a spokesperson of like who is supposed to be in a relationship with who and who's supposed to break up with their boyfriend when they go to treatment. That's not my place. I feel like my place is to share my experience and say, hey, this is what I know about the process, and there will be more pain. We are the outliers. It does not end this way commonly. Most people do not make it through it together, and that's just the fact of the matter. Recovery's hard by yourself. It is so hard by yourself, and just double the challenges when there's another person in the mix who's experiencing those same things. So, it's, I wish, and that's a part of, being a person in recovery and sharing your experiences. We say these things to people, and, just as a therapist, we give experience, we give knowledge, and whether they take it or leave it, that's up to them. And sometimes you just want to shake them and say, listen, like, I've done it, I've seen it, I've lived it. You don't have to do it, but, unfortunately, we are people that learn the hard way.
I think one thing that you guys both, have shared, and I can even, share not from your experiences, but a lot of times the one thing that I hear from a lot of clients that I encounter is those big emotions. And I can't think of a bigger emotion than love. And especially a lot of clients coming into recovery and being in relationships or new relationships, that is one of the hardest emotions to try to deal with or overcome, those big emotions. And I'm just curious, was that part of the struggle, dealing with those big emotions?
Yeah.
Dealing with recovery and dealing with some of those big emotions in a relationship, and some of those emotions coming back from, you numbing them possibly. And now you have your emotions that you were dealing with in your active addiction, and now you have big emotions from relationships. So that's a tremendous undertaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think a big thing, so there's a common saying where it's like, the good thing about getting sober is you feel your emotions, but the bad thing about getting sober is you feel your emotions. You know what I mean? So, and I think especially in treatment, we focus so much on the negative emotions, like the stress and the anger and the grief and all that kind of stuff, and the triggers. But we sometimes overlook the positive ones as well, like love and happiness and all these things, because they come back very intensely. And, to the point where the positive ones can almost impact you as negatively as the negative ones. Like having this overwhelming love or this overwhelming happiness or this overwhelming urge to give back. Like perfect example for me is like, when I got sober, a lot of my friends were not sober. That when I came into treatment, a lot of them kind of stayed in the same kind of lifestyle. And so I immediately got out of treatment. I had 28 days sober, and I wanted to be the savior. And it was that overwhelming sense of like loving these people and the loyalty and all that stuff that I had for them. But in wanting to be back with them so bad, to be this example and to show them that like, recovery is possible and stuff, I was a martyr in a sense because I put myself back right in the same situation I was in. And so I think even things like a relationship like Casey and I's, where I felt so strongly, but in doing so, like you said, I prioritized a relationship over sobriety, or I prioritized, her sobriety over my sobriety. You know what I mean? And so like things like that. And so I think especially early on, again, I wouldn't change the outcome, but I think I would do a couple of things differently for sure. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't until, because we did the whole, we'll go to treatment together thing and get sober. That doesn't work. But it wasn't until, right, like I went to Texas, she went to Tennessee, and we were writing letters for 6 months. You know what I mean? So it wasn't until we actually split up, went our separate ways. We stayed in a relationship the whole time, but physically splitting up, and then even after that, right, like I think that's why she's great at what she does now, is because she did the whole deal and then went to sober living and all that stuff. So even after Tennessee, she went to California for sober living. I went to Florida for sober living. So we were not in close proximity intentionally for
14 months.
Casey's
But
got it
who's
down to a
counting?
science.
Counting, yeah.
oh my God.
It was 14 months.
Yeah. And even then, I mean, the perfect example too is even then, I think like Casey's sober date is like March 22nd. We both went into treatment at the same time. Mine's not, what is it, 10/4?
Yep.
Yeah. Because even when I was by myself, I still had another one in me.
Yeah. And I will say to that point is, even being all the way across the country from him, when he relapsed at 6 months sober, that was the closest I was to relapsing myself. And it's because I didn't know, like, our paths had been so parallel for so long. My first thought was, if he is in that place, I have to be in that place too. And that's codependency. That's like so many things. But that was the first time I thought that. I was 6 months sober. And I was in California. I knew everyone I knew was in recovery. My first thought was, how do I get to Skid Row? With $0, by the way. And it was a fleeting thought. I called my sponsor. We talked through it. I talked to the women in my sober living house, but it was terrifying when that happened. It was my first experience of feeling what our families felt. I mean, he was missing for 24 hours in Dallas, Texas, with no phone, no car.
Wow, Mike.
Sleeping in a garage. It was, sorry, was that too much to
No,
share?
no,
Okay.
I'm an open book.
Okay, well, that's what happened. And
Sure was.
I was, I was embarrassed to tell my mom that. I was talking to his mom and his sister, and I was like, what do we do? And they were like, welcome, this is what we've been living this for years. And it was mortifying. And, I think that just is another example of, had I been with him, even at 6 months sober, I could have been in the same position. And, back to my point earlier of, I'm not here to tell anyone who to be in a relationship with, but what I will tell you is what works, and trying to find recovery with someone within yourself who you are unwell, your brain is not right, and then you're with someone else who's in the same position. It's challenging. the right way, if you're gonna do it in any kind of way, the right way is to not do it together. Do it separately. Separate yourself from all those unhealthy behaviors, the unhealthy, pieces of the relationship. Heal yourselves before you try to come back together. And I didn't know that that was the plan for us, really. I was recommended to go to California for aftercare, and still, at 90 days sober, I was like, how do I get to Texas?
I was so mad she didn't come to Texas.
I
It's like,
think
how could she not want to live here?
I think Casey brings up an interesting topic, and it's something that I've thought about a lot. And a lot of this does not just apply to relationships in recovery. I think a lot of this applies to what is happening a lot in society today. A lot of relationships are long distance relationships. And I think if we can take anything away from what we're really discussing today is taking the time to really heal yourself.
Yep.
No matter if that's from addiction, if that's from trauma, if that's from mental health, whatever you've experienced, because we've experienced so much in life. We just came off of a pandemic. We just came off from so many tragic things that have occurred within the last 5 years. We are all healing. And I've seen so many long distance relationships that are occurring now. You bring up such a good point about taking the time to heal yourself before you step into anything else. And I'm curious as to what you guys think for the clients that we serve. Are we doing, because this is something that's going to happen. I know, Casey, you've seen it. Michael, you've seen it. I've definitely seen relationships that are going to form. Are we as clinicians, as providers, are we doing enough to educate, discuss, talk about this, present the information about relationships for our clients? We've so long frowned upon it and shied away from the conversation and just don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Are we at a point where this needs to be included in the curriculum? This needs to be talked about because it's obvious that it's happening. As you stated, you guys are the outliers. Do we need to do more to have these open dialogues and discussions about, okay, if this is something you're dead set on doing it, this is a healthy way to do it. Write letters, separate, heal yourself. And even for our clients that may not be struggling with addiction but mental health, okay, heal yourself. Through these conversations, do we need to flip the way we're having the conversations?
Oof.
See, I put you on the spot this
Yeah, I
time.
know. So I would say yes, but along with that, I would say I think there is a lot of places I think we fall short in the industry from a whole different bunch of aspects. But when it comes to relationships, and I'll say, even without it being two people in recovery in the relationship, but even just a newly sober person with a quote unquote normal person, right? Or someone who's maybe comes into treatment going through a divorce and then, or a separation, and then, 2-3 months into treatment because, they're returning to that old person that the person initially got married to, they start rekindling that, whatever it is. I think there does need to be more education around intimate relationships in recovery, whether that's short-term, long-term, whatever it is, just for the simple fact of not only to protect the client, but also to protect whoever they may end up being with, right? So we talk a lot about, obviously, the family stuff, huge on that here. We talk about a lot of the familial or already established relationships, right? So like the significant others, when they come in, that are usually pretty torn up, the relationships. But I don't think when it comes to new relationships, we do enough educating around that. So I think not even intimate, but just from any type of relationship standpoint, creating new ones in sobriety. I think we as an industry should probably do a better job at educating people around it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what we discuss around family recovery and how those relationships, those individuals heal separately. You know, that's why I advocate for a sober living environment, because whether the families realize it or not, they're traumatized. Like, if you think your person could die at any moment, or you think that their life is at risk, or they are making questionable decisions and they're not safe, that's traumatizing. And having that separation for even a temporary living environment that's different is so key to individuals healing and then coming back together. It's, without overcomplicating it, it's what we're already doing. I do think we could clarify a little bit that this extends to romantic relationships. You know, when we hear family, we think mom and dad, husband, kids, we think of our immediate family. But really, the family approach should consider and does consider everyone in your sphere of influence. Who are you closest with? Who is your best friend? Was your uncle very close to you? You know, some people don't have close family members like that aren't, you know, their parents. It's considering all of those things. So, and I think just as someone who's been a client, we need to clarify what that family is, because it's all of those pieces.
I think it's so important to reiterate that at the Blanchard Institute, we do take pride in incorporating the whole family, no matter what that looks like. And Casey brought up a really important thing that all of us are like schooled in, and that's the sphere of influence. That is a huge component of what we do, making sure that we have everyone involved that is important to the client, whether that be romantic or friend or the groomer at the pet store. If that person's going to be a support for you, we want to make sure that they're involved. And I do agree that we have to do a better job at owning up to these relationships are going to occur. We can no longer say, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, and we're going to pop your hand if you do, because it's going to happen, especially in the age that we live in. We have more, you know, relationships that are long-term, people in recovery, like you guys, one in California, one in Texas. It happens. And I think this is something that we have to continue to address and continue to talk about and continue to have conversations about. And we would love for our viewers to give your feedback. If you are an individual that would like to possibly be a guest, we would definitely welcome you to reach out to us. You can reach out to Erica. You can reach out to Erica Baskins, or you can reach out to Michael True. I wouldn't say reach out to me, but you can reach out to one of them, and we can definitely see if that's something that we can venture into. But we do want to hear your feedback. We want to hear your takes on the discussions. If there's a topic you want to hear us talk about, we welcome that. We don't shy away from hard conversations. We don't shy away from, you know, hard dialogue, and we want to include our viewers in our conversations. So again, thank you again for listening to Shades of View, and we can look forward to
episode 5.
Awesome.